You've probably tried to quit something before. Maybe it was scrolling too much, maybe it was skipping workouts, maybe it was eating badly when you're stressed. And you understood why it was happening. You could explain it to someone else. You knew the trigger, you knew the pattern, you even knew what you should do instead. But it didn't stop. That's the part that feels the worst. Not the habit itself, but the fact that understanding it didn't seem to matter. You weren't confused. You weren't unaware. You just couldn't stop. Most people assume that once you understand a bad habit, breaking it becomes a matter of willpower or discipline. But that's not how habits actually work. Understanding a habit and controlling a habit involve completely different systems in your brain. And those systems don't always communicate the way you'd expect. When you first develop a habit, your brain is actively making decisions. You're thinking through each step. But over time, the behavior gets transferred to a part of your brain that handles automatic processes. It becomes something you do without deciding to do it. That's what makes it a habit in the first place. The problem is that this automatic system doesn't care about your understanding. It doesn't update just because you've learned something new. It responds to context, to triggers, to repetition. Not to insight. So when you recognize a bad habit and try to stop it, you're essentially using one part of your brain to fight another part. And the part that runs the habit has a significant advantage. It's faster, it's older in evolutionary terms, and it doesn't require conscious effort. Let's say you always check your phone when you sit down at your desk. You've done it hundreds of times. One day, you realize it's distracting you and decide to stop. But the next time you sit down, your hand reaches for your phone before you even remember your decision. That's not a failure of willpower. That's your automatic system doing exactly what it's been trained to do. Research into habit formation shows that the cue and the action become so tightly linked that they start to bypass conscious thought entirely. Your brain is trying to be efficient. It doesn't want you to have to think about every small action. But that efficiency becomes a problem when the action is something you no longer want to do. Understanding the habit gives you information. It tells you what the trigger is, what need the habit is filling, why it started in the first place. But information alone doesn't rewire the automatic pathways. Those pathways were built through repetition, and they're maintained the same way. This is why you can feel so frustrated with yourself. You're not ignorant. You're not in denial. You see the problem clearly. But seeing it doesn't make your brain stop doing what it's learned to do without asking. And here's the uncomfortable part. Even when you manage to resist the habit consciously, the urge doesn't go away. Because the automatic system is still there, still responding to the same cues. You're not erasing the habit. You're overriding it. And overriding something takes effort every single time. That effort is why breaking a habit feels so exhausting even when the habit itself is small. You're not just stopping a behavior. You're constantly monitoring yourself, catching yourself, redirecting yourself. It's an active process that requires attention and energy, and it has to happen again and again. Think about someone who's trying to stop snacking at night. They know they're not actually hungry. They know it's just routine. They've read about it, they understand the pattern completely. But every evening, when they walk into the kitchen, the urge appears automatically. They have to actively decide not to open the cabinet. And they have to make that same decision tomorrow night, and the night after that. People often feel like they should be past this stage by now. They've understood the habit for weeks or even months. They think the awareness should have solved it. But awareness and automation are separate. One doesn't automatically undo the other. This doesn't mean habits are permanent or that change is impossible. It just means that understanding why you do something is a different process than changing the behavior itself. And expecting one to do the work of the other leads to a lot of unnecessary self-blame. You're not failing because you're weak. You're experiencing the normal gap between knowing something and doing something. That gap exists for everyone. It's not a sign that you're broken or that you're not trying hard enough. It's just how the brain works when automatic behaviors are involved. The real challenge isn't that you don't understand. The challenge is that understanding isn't the tool you thought it was. It's helpful, but it's not sufficient on its own. And recognizing that can actually make the process less frustrating, because you stop expecting insight to do something it was never designed to do. Breaking a habit requires repetition in the opposite direction. It requires changing the context or the cue. It requires building a new automatic response, which takes time and consistency. None of that happens just because you've figured out what's going on. So if you've ever felt confused about why knowing better didn't make you do better, this is why. Your brain isn't ignoring your understanding. It's just operating on a system that doesn't run on understanding. And that's not a flaw. It's just a limitation you're working within.